If you found yourself at some point in time, or maybe multiple points in time, thinking to yourself, why am I so sexually attracted to that person? Why am I so romantically attracted to that person? Why do me and this person just click like we've known each other before? Well, then this is the video for you. Hola my beautiful lotus flowers, welcome back or welcome to my channel. If you're into nerding out on everything astrology, spirituality, and self-transformation, this is a community for you. Today we're talking all about synastry and astrology, about soulmate indicators, about birth chart synastry, etc. If you've ever wondered how you can look at your chart and another person's chart to identify the ways in which you two connect through the planetary energy, then this is the video for you. Now, I just want to disclaim that this is a very complex part of astrology. It's a very complex branch that can take years of study. And in today's video, I'm going to try and make it more digestible so you can go out and look at your chart and someone else's chart and be able to identify the basics of compatibility and synastry in astrology. So I'm going to break the video up into two chunks. The first is going to have general instant compatibility indicators. So these are going to be more general things that aren't quite as complicated or as important, or they may signify a shorter relationship or maybe a quick chemistry. Then the second half of the video is going to be more long-term soulmate, twin flame type compatibility indicators. So these are going to be more transformative, impactful, potentially destructive indicators of people who are going to have a very big impact in your life. I want to preface this video by giving my 2 cents on a soulmate versus a twin flame. First off, I know the two are widely spread terms that have become so popular and so romanticized, but whether you consider a soulmate different from a twin flame, whether you consider them the same thing, whatever it is, I view both as one and the same when it comes to being a transformative partnership in your life. Both the soulmate and the twin flame aren't necessarily your one and only that you'll be with forever, but I do believe that they are extremely transformative, important, and impactful relationships that you encounter in your life. So no matter what, these relationships are probably going to be pretty turbulent and are probably going to be the ones that make the most change and cause you to really flower into who you're meant to be. With that disclaimer out of the way, what exactly is birth chart synastry? So before we dive into this video, you might not even know what birth chart synastry is. Basically, it's when you take your chart and someone else's chart and you map them together to see where your planets and your houses and everything interacts between your two charts. So when you look up birth chart synastry, you have to have your exact birth time, as well as all the other information, as well as their exact birth time, because any slight change in the birth time or the information, whether it's the location, the date, the year, etc., any change will cause a discrepancy in reading your synastry between your charts. And if you want to look up birth chart synastry for you and somebody else or for 2 other people, then I highly recommend going to astroseek.com. I'll leave the link down below. You can input all your birth information and be able to pull up the birth chart synastry there. But it is going to look very complicated upon first glance. So take it easy, take it step by step. So go ahead and do that now if you want to kind of follow along looking at the indicators as I explain them. Let's start off with general/instant compatibility. The first component to take into consideration when considering general compatibility with somebody is your overall elemental compatibility. So if you haven't watched my video already on dominant elements and how to identify yours, I will link both of those here. There's 2 separate videos for you to learn from. But you have a dominant element of your birth chart. You may be a water sun sign, but that is not necessarily your dominant element. You may be a water sun sign with predominantly fire in your chart. It's very important to identify that element, but you can also take a glance at your chart and see the general element that you tend to have a lot of, or maybe you're well balanced. Whatever it is, it's very important to take this into consideration with somebody that you may naturally vibe with right away. because typically the elemental compatibility goes as follows. Usually fire and air have the same general vibration, and earth and water often have a similar vibration in the way that they tend to naturally come together with a natural chemistry. This may be the reason you have kind of an effortless chemistry with some people if they have elemental compatibility with you. Second, we have identifying the ascendant and descendant of you and the person that you're looking at. But what I mean by this, first off, if you don't know what the descendant sign is, I also have a video on that. It will also be linked here if you'd like to go watch it, so this makes more sense. But you have the ascendant sign, aka the rising sign, right? So most people know their rising sign, but a lot of people don't know about the descendant sign. For example, my rising sign is Gemini. So therefore my descendant sign is the sign that is directly opposite my ascendant. So the sign that is directly opposite Gemini is Sagittarius. So that means my descending sign is Sagittarius. If I meet somebody whose ascendant sign is my descendant, so that means if I meet somebody who has a Sagittarius rising, there can be an instant click, an instant compatibility that you feel. Now again, this is the general instant compatibility category of this video, so it doesn't necessarily mean longevity. It may, but the rising signs are very, very superficial. They're, based a lot on first impression and how you carry yourself in general, often around people you don't know too well. So this can cause an instant click though between you and somebody, and it can sometimes signify a really good friendship as well. Third, we have aspects between the sun and the moon. What I mean when I talk about aspects between the sun and the moon is this means that your sun or your moon is directly aspecting their sun or their moon, meaning that it's making a direct conjunction, trine, square, opposition between your sun or your moon and their sun or their moon. With that being said, although sun and moon aspects may lead to a long-term partnership, a lot of times these individuals feel a really strong instant attraction or chemistry where they feel like they just get each other. And the reason for that is when we look at the sun and the moon, we're kind of looking at yin and yang, feminine, masculine energy. The sun is the masculine, the moon is the feminine, and the two complete each other in the yin and yang energy. So kind of similar to the ascendant descendant sign, which is more of a surface level attraction to somebody. The sun and the moon can kind of be a semi-superficial attraction because you have somebody's ego clicking with somebody's emotional nature. So what happens when you have the ego versus the emotion, the ego being the sun, the emotion being the moon, is you have the moon person often supplying a lot of emotional support to the sun person's ego. And the sun person is often the driver and the leader and the one who is pretty much just taking the reins in the relationship. And this may seem good at first, or maybe this is a dynamic that works out for these two individuals. Obviously, it's going to be different for everybody, and astrology doesn't have all the answers, but this can lead to an initial powerful attraction, and it may seem like an ideal partnership, but this can really turn into kind of a power struggle and an emotional struggle later on in the relationship, depending. So when you have a sun and moon conjunction, meaning that the sun and the moon are right next to each other, this will often lead to an undeniably strong connection right away, where you two just seem to ebb and flow almost perfectly upon first impression. This is because energy is being directly channeled between the sun, like I said, and the moon, which is inner emotion. Although the conjunction can feel powerful at first, this is a dynamic that can quickly fizzle out or die down depending on the rest of these individuals' synastry placements. Sextiles and trines can have a similar energy to this, but not usually as strong as the conjunction. So there may be more room for a peaceful, flowing energy that doesn't feel quite so overpowering. Now, if you have a sun and moon square or opposition, these may feel like even stronger initial attractions. Sun and moon squares or oppositions, if you don't know anything about aspects, squares and oppositions are usually more challenging aspects to have. But when it comes to synastry, These aspects, usually when they're challenging, it means there's more initial chemistry. So if you have a sun and moon square or a sun and moon opposition between your charts, then this means that you probably have an even more powerful initial physical attraction to this person, an even stronger emotional attraction to the person. But because these are more conflicting aspects, the way that energy is channeled between you two may create more conflict. This is because the sun person's ego can be heavily challenged by the emotional nature of the moon person. And the emotional nature of the moon person can become really aggravating and almost depressing for the sun person, like they feel like they're being dragged down. When you have a square opposition between the sun and moon, this means that there can be more tension when these two are trying to understand each other, and the dynamic is going to be more difficult to come to compromise and to come to understanding. Fourth, we have aspects between Venus and Mars. Often when you have aspects between Venus and Mars, you can encounter an extreme, instant, powerful physical and sexual chemistry. It's likely that you find this person physically irresistible, even though this may not always last long term, which is why I included this aspect in this category. But when you think about it, Venus and Mars are very physical planets. Both Venus is the planet of love, beauty, creation, art, whereas Mars is the planet of physical assertion, sex drive, aggression, ambition, all of these physical things, right? And both are very sexual planets in different ways. So when the two are creating aspects, like one person's Venus or Mars is aspecting the other person's Venus or Mars, you have two very physical, very often sexually driven planets coming together and directly interacting between two individuals. So it's going to create a very powerful physical chemistry between the two. Now, if you have Venus and Mars in conjunction, that's probably when this attraction is the most explosive and immediately prevalent between two people. And it may be up to these two individuals whether they get burned by their sparks or they learn how to harness the sparks into a long-term flame. With a trine or a sextile between the two, the sparks are more likely to naturally turn into a warm, hearty fire on its own, transforming this aspect into something less aggressive and a bit more passionate and romantic. But if there's an opposition or a square present between the Venus and the Mars, then these individuals will definitely have a fiery, explosive chemistry that may be more difficult to harness into something healthy. So with an opposition or a square, there can be more challenges around possession and temperaments. So a lot of open understanding and communication will be needed because it'll feel like these two are on different pages quite a bit. If you're enjoying the video so far, just don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell before you go so you don't miss future videos like this one. And if you want me to talk more about compatibility in the future, liking this video and subscribing will let me know that you want to see more. And you can even hit the super thanks if you want to go the extra mile to support this channel. Everything is appreciated. And you can head to Instagram at Marisa LaBlue, where I post more fun astrology content, more of my daily life, etc. So yeah. Now let's hop into talking about soulmate / long-term compatibility. Number one is identifying the point of Vertex and whether it's in each other's 7th house, aspecting the 7th house planetary ruler, or your personal planets. So the point of Vertex is actually a mathematical angle in the birth chart that is considered a point of karma or destiny, and it can potentially tell us a lot about predestined people and events in our lives. So if this point in either of your charts are aspecting, then this connection has the potential to be extremely karmic, and it's highly likely that you will learn a lot from that connection. But when looking at vertex aspects, it's most important to look for conjunctions, oppositions, and squares. Not as much trines and sextiles, as these aspects tend to be weaker in general. Although I included this in the long-term category, having an aspected point of vertex in either of your synastry charts doesn't necessarily mean it is going to be a long-term partnership. It doesn't mean it may last forever. Honestly, none of these mean that. So let me just put that out there. None of these mean it's gonna last forever. But what it does mean is that this was a relationship that you pretty much couldn't avoid. this was a lesson in your life, whether learned through that person or a different person, it had to be learned. A lesson had to be learned when you met this person. And again, what you're looking for is whether your point of vertex falls in their 7th house, or if their point of vertex falls in your 7th house, or if their point of vortex or your point of vortex is aspecting the planetary ruler of their 7th house. So for example, if my point of vortex is in the 2nd house, the 2nd house ruler is Venus. So if my point of vortex is aspecting their Venus, then that is also really important. But on top of that, it's not just about the 7th house, but if your point of vortex or theirs is aspecting any of your personal planets, the personal planets being the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, then those are also going to be really significant as well. Second, we have the identification of the North or South node in each other's 7th houses, aspecting the 7th house ruler or any of your personal planets. So the same as the point of vortex, we are identifying whether your North node or South node or their North node or South node falls in each other's 7th house, if either of them are aspecting your 7th house planetary ruler, or if they're aspecting any of the personal planets. Any of these will be very important, but also it's very important if the North node or South node, if their sun sign is your North node or South node. So like say if your North node is Taurus, and their sun sign is Taurus, this can also create a more instant karmic attraction to each other as well. Whereas if your South node is in like Scorpio and their sun sign is in Scorpio, this can also be somewhat significant, but not as much as the North node being their sun sign. But also any aspects between the South node and their planets or whatever can indicate more of somebody that we may feel comfortable with, but isn't necessarily good for our growth. You're probably wondering like, what the heck are you talking about? Like what? You may not even know what the North node and South node are about. Basically, the North node is an indicator of where we need to head in our lives, where the most of our growth lies, kind of the path or the direction we should follow in our life. Whereas the South node is indicative of our past life and the lessons that we already know, the things that we already have a hold of, and the things we need to move away from in order to karmically grow in this current life. So if you identify any North node aspects or significant placements with the North node between your synastry charts, then this is very indicative of a very karmic connection, similar to the point of vertex. But the South node may kind of show you someone that you feel very comfortable with, like in a way that you've known them, or maybe this is the type of person you tend to constantly be attracted to and settle with, but you never feel fulfilled, or you never feel like you're growing, or you feel like you're getting complacent. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be true, but this is the biggest difference between North node and South node when it comes to synastry. Third, we have aspects with the outer planets. The outer planets include Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, because these are the planets that have much slower orbits than the inner personal planets. So therefore, their effects are felt longer term and more widespread. They often influence the collective rather than just the individual. So when it comes to synastry, significant aspects being made to someone's outer planets can be something to note, as it may indicate some sort of long-term significance with this person. For example, if your personal planets make a lot of significant aspects with their Saturn, this person may ignite a lot of transformation around lessons that you struggle to learn, your self-discipline, etc. But we'll actually talk about a couple of the outer planets that are super important when it comes to this category. Fourth, we have aspects between the Moon and Pluto. Moon and Pluto aspects in astrological synastry are considered some of the most powerful aspects that there can be, because they are some of the most destructive and transformative, but in a productive way, in a way that can really grow you and the other individual in ways that you can't imagine. And the reason for that is because The moon, again, is your inner emotion, your emotional nature, and Pluto is all about rebirth and death and destruction. And oftentimes it's the death, rebirth, and destruction of things that need to be transformed, that need to be changed, and need to grow into something new. Oftentimes, no matter the aspect that's present, these two are going to provide significant tests for each other in their emotional dynamic. Oftentimes, the Pluto person will challenge the moon person's emotions in some way. And oftentimes, this is a learning curve for both individuals because both Pluto and the moon being triggered often means past emotional pains are also being triggered. So these two may activate each other's past traumas, which can destroy the relationship or actually make it 10 times stronger. Regardless, this often undoubtedly feels like a destined connection to both of you. Next, we have aspects between Venus and Neptune. Aspects between Venus and Neptune are known to be, by far, one of the most ethereal, romantic aspects encountered in astrological synastry. Pairs with an aspect between Venus and Neptune probably look and feel like a fairy tale, otherworldly love in some way. But things are not always as they appear, especially with Neptune, planet of illusions, present. And this can be where this beautiful aspect may create challenges. So again, we have Venus, which, like I mentioned earlier, is a very physical planet. And we have Neptune, which is a very dreamy, illusionary planet. So the two can get muddled because one has to do with dropping the veil between the physical and the spiritual, whereas the other is very much physical. So what can happen is the two can have a distorted view of each other. They can both kind of have this very romanticized, fantastical view of each other, when that's not necessarily the reality. Whatever aspect is happening between these two, it doesn't matter whether it's a conjunction, sextile, trine, opposition, square, whatever it is. These two are going to need to recognize the reality of each other as a partner in some way. Because at first, it's going to seem like these two are like Prince Charming and the princess, or the knight in shining armor and the perfect fairy princess, whatever you can imagine. It's going to seem perfect, and it's going to seem almost too good to be true, probably, on the outside looking in. If you know anybody who's in a relationship that has an aspect like this, then you may have seen it with your own eyes. So it can possibly leave a lot of room for disappointment because the two can have very extreme expectations of each other, and they can have that distorted view of what each person really is. I mean, in the end, we're all human and we're not perfect as much as we can seem to be perfect at the beginning of any relationship. However, this aspect is not bad. It can just cause some distortion of how you view each other. But in the end, this aspect does create a lot of very deep love and connection and romanticism between the two. It can be a very soft, beautiful, loving aspect to have between two people, as long as they can accept each other for who they are, and they can accept the imperfections as well as all of the things they consider perfect about the other person. As a bonus, let's talk about Juno sign aspects. Juno is the asteroid of love and marriage, and it's not commonly used in synastry because the asteroids are considered having weaker effects and not as powerful as the actual planets. But it is important to take note of it because it can help add a lot of detail around what we look for in a long-term commitment with another person. Like I said, a lot of times they're not taken into consideration in synastry because they're not as powerful as the actual planets, but this is why it's important to only look at exact aspects when looking at Juno. If you are going to take Juno into account when it comes to synastry, you want to look for Juno making aspects with the personal planets of the other person and vice versa. Now, what I mean by exact aspect is that it means it has an orb of 0 degrees. So when you look at a birth chart and you look at where it lists the aspects, it's going to show you a degrees of each aspect. And some are going to be 6 degrees, 4 degrees. These are considered loose aspects. It's how far away the planets are from each other in this aspect, how far away they are from being an exact aspect. The looser the aspect, the less energetic power they have in that aspect. But the closer, the tighter the orb, meaning if it's between like 0 to 2 degrees of an orb, then that means that they're exchanging a lot of energy. There's a lot of clear energy exchange going on between those two planets. So when it comes to Juno aspects, look for that 0 degree. And even if there's a 1 degree, you can still take it into consideration, but the exact aspect is going to be the most accurate. If you see any of these aspects being made between your Juno or their Juno and your guys' personal planets, then this is going to be significant, but the aspect you want to look for the most is the conjunction. And this will tell you a lot about where you tend to lead yourself when it comes to looking for a long-term partnership. Juno reveals a lot about what we value in a long-term commitment, partnership, marriage, whatever it is, whether you want marriage or not. Juno can tell you a lot about what you look for and what the other person looks for and how that interacts with their chart. Once again, I wanted this video to be a more simple stepping stone into the complex branch of synastry when it comes to astrology. Hopefully you were able to take your birth chart and somebody else's birth chart and kind of go through each point I talked about in this video. And if you did identify anything between your charts, then leave a comment down below, or just leave a comment down below in general about your thoughts on synastry. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you did enjoy the video. And you can always leave a super thanks if you want to support this community even more. It is always appreciated. You can also head over to my Instagram at Marisa LaBlue if you want more daily tidbits of my life as well as fun astrology content, or you can watch these videos until I release a new one that'll help you so much more on your astrological and spiritual journey. But until I see you in the next video, thank you so much again for being here. I always appreciate you. Adios.